The road into Nazareth climbed through limestone hills, the color of old bone, and in the dry months, the dust rose with every footstep and settled on everything. The olive leaves, the goat hides, the shoulders of the men coming back from the terraced fields. If you had walked that road in the year 20, somewhere in the long reign of the Emperor Tiberius, you would have passed a village so small that most travelers never bothered to learn its name. A cluster of perhaps 50 houses pressed into the slope of a valley. A few hundred people. No paved forum, no theater, no monument. Nothing a Roman map would record. And somewhere among those houses, in a workshop that smelled of cut wood and stone dust, a man bent over his work. A man whose name would one day be spoken in every language on earth, and who, at that moment, had done nothing the world would ever write down. That is the strangeness we are going to walk into today, because the one whose 3 short years of public work would split history into before and after spent roughly 9/10 of his life here, in silence, waiting, almost 30 years of it. And the 4 Gospels, books that record his every step once his mission began, fall almost completely quiet about them. Why? Why would God, having entered the world, wait nearly 3 decades before saying a single public word? Why a workshop in a forgotten hamlet instead of a throne in Jerusalem, or a chair in the great schools of the rabbis? The answer is not what most people assume, and it begins not with a miracle, but with a question every one of us has asked in the quiet seasons of our own lives. Let us go to Nazareth. Not the Nazareth of stained glass imagination, but the real one. The one that archaeologists have been pulling out of the ground stone by stone. Let us stand where he stood and find out what the waiting was actually for. Imagine you turn off the valley path and step into the village itself. The first thing you notice is how poor it is. There is no marble here, no imported glass, no painted plaster. In December of the year 2009, the Israel Antiquities Authority announced something that had never been found before: an actual dwelling from 1st century Nazareth, uncovered beside the Church of the Annunciation. For 2,000 years, we had tombs and cisterns, but not a single house from the village of Jesus. Now we had one, and what it told us was almost startling in its plainness. The excavation director, Yardena Alexandre, described it as small and modest. 2 little rooms and a courtyard, with a cistern cut into the rock to catch the winter rains. The walls were rough fieldstone. The floors were beaten earth. There was no glass. There were no imported goods. Whoever lived there owned almost nothing. But there was one detail that spoke louder than the poverty. Among the broken pottery, the archaeologists found vessels carved from chalk stone. That matters more than it sounds. In the 1st century, observant Jews believed that stone, unlike clay, could not contract ritual impurity. So a chalk cup, a chalk bowl, was a quiet declaration. It said, "A faithful Jewish family lives here, a family that cared about purity, about the law, about being clean before God in a village too small and too poor to be noticed by anyone else." This was the world Jesus was raised in. Not a world of privilege, a world of devotion without spectacle. And the village itself was tiny. From the dwelling and the burial caves around it, scholars estimate Nazareth at this time was a hamlet of around 50 houses spread across roughly 4 acres. A few hundred people at most. Everyone knew everyone. Everyone knew whose son you were. There was nowhere to hide and nothing to prove. This is the dry ground the prophet Isaiah had spoken of centuries before, and we will come back to that, because the obscurity is not an accident in this story. The obscurity is the point. But here is the detail that almost no one knows. and it changes everything about how we picture these silent years. Nazareth was poor and forgotten, but it was not isolated, because just over the hill, an hour's walk away, something enormous was being built. Roughly 6 kilometers to the northwest of Nazareth stood the city of Sepphoris. And in the years when Jesus was growing up, Sepphoris was one of the great construction projects of the entire region. The Jewish historian Josephus called the rebuilt city the ornament of all Galilee. Herod Antipas, the ruler of Galilee, had chosen it as his capital and was turning it into a gleaming Greco-Roman showpiece. Colonnaded streets, public buildings, a theater, mosaics. And to build something like that, you need workers. You need craftsmen. You need men who can cut and dress stone, raise beams, frame roofs. The word the Gospels use for the trade of Joseph and Jesus is the Greek word Tektōn. We translate it carpenter, and we picture a man planing a plank of wood. But Tektōn is broader than that. In a region where the main building material was stone, a Tektōn was a builder, a craftsman who worked in timber and in stone alike. And we know from the excavations that the hills around Nazareth were quarried for building stone in exactly this period. So put the pieces together. A massive royal building project, an hour's walk away, a shortage of skilled hands, a family of builders living in the next village over. Many scholars believe it is highly likely that Joseph, and Jesus after him, walked that road to Sepphoris and worked on the rebuilding of Herod Antipas's capital. I want to be careful here, because this channel does not turn guesses into facts. The Gospels never name Sepphoris, not once. This is a reconstruction, an informed probability, not something the text states, but it is a probability built on geography, on archaeology, and on the meaning of a single Greek word. And if it is true, then the hidden years of Jesus were not spent in quiet retreat from the world. They were spent with calloused hands, in the dust and noise of a building site, among day laborers and foremen, and the ordinary working poor of Galilee. Picture the walk, if it happened as the evidence suggests. Before dawn, in the cool, the road over the ridge from Nazareth, an hour on foot with the tools on your shoulder. Then the noise of the site rising as you crest the hill, the ring of iron on stone, the shouts of foremen, the groan of timber being hauled, the dust of 100 men cutting and lifting and raising a Roman city for a Herodian king. Greek in the air beside Aramaic, coins changing hands, the whole restless machinery of empire and ambition, and then, at the end of the day, the walk back over the ridge to the silence of the village, to the small house, the chalk cups, the coming Sabbath, the law. If this is how the years passed, then the Son of God learned the world of work and money and power from the inside, with sweat on his back. And every evening he chose to turn his back on the capital and walk home to the quiet. The waiting was not ignorance of the world. It was a daily refusal of the shortcut the world was offering him. There is something darker beneath those shining streets, too. Sepphoris had not always been a jewel. When Jesus was an infant, just after the death of Herod the Great in 4 BC, Galilee erupted in revolt. The Roman governor of Syria, a man named Varus, marched in to crush it. According to Josephus, Sepphoris was burned to the ground, and its inhabitants were sold into slavery. And in the wider campaign of vengeance, around 2,000 rebels were crucified across the region. So the beautiful capital that Jesus may have helped to build had risen, within living memory, out of ash and crosses, just over the hill from his front door. He grew up in the long shadow of Roman power and Roman crosses. He would have heard the stories from old men who remembered. The instrument of his own death was not abstract to him. It was part of the landscape of his childhood. And here, before we go any further, is the first key to the question in the title, because the answer is already beginning to surface. Why 30 years of waiting? Part of it is hidden in a single number, a number that meant far more to his world than it does to ours. In ancient Israel, 30 was not merely an age, it was a threshold, the age at which a man was finally received as carrying full, public, God-given authority. Jesus was not idling in that workshop. He was waiting for an appointed hour. And how deep that appointment runs, in the pattern of Scripture and in the words of the prophets, is something we will uncover before the end. For now, hold on to this. The waiting was not delay, it was timing. Let me stop here for a moment, because I think this is where the story stops being only about him and starts being about you. We tend to measure our lives by the visible parts, the promotion, the achievement, the moment people finally see what we can do. And so the waiting, the long, ordinary stretch where nothing seems to be happening, where you are just doing the work in front of you and no one is watching. The waiting feels like wasted time, like the part of the story that doesn't count. Have you ever lived in a season like that? A stretch of months or years where you felt unseen, unused, like your real life hadn't started yet. I would like you to hold that memory for a moment and tell me about it in the comments below, not as an abstraction, but as something real that you have actually lived. Because the man in the workshop at Nazareth lived almost 30 years in exactly that kind of season. Hold your own in mind. We are going to find out, together, what it was for. Now let us go inside the rhythm of those years, the daily life that the Gospels pass over in near silence, but that the history and the archaeology let us reconstruct. The day began early, with the light, in a house like the one the archaeologists found, the family in the small rooms, the courtyard, the center of everything. Cooking, the cistern, the animals, the work. The food was the plain fare of the Galilean poor. Coarse bread, olives, lentils, salted fish carried up from the lake, with meat saved for the festivals. This was not poverty as the village felt it. It was simply life, ordinary, repetitive, demanding. And in the middle of that unremarkable routine, year after year, something was being formed that no one in Nazareth could yet see. And through it ran the trade. If you have ever worked with your hands, you know that craftsmanship is its own kind of teacher. It teaches patience, because wood and stone do not hurry. It teaches honesty, because a badly made yoke or a crooked beam is a lie that eventually collapses. It teaches you the weight of things, the grain of things, the difference between fast work and good work. For something close to 2 decades, this was the education of Jesus of Nazareth. Not in a palace, not in a famous academy, at a workbench, but there was a second school, and it met every Sabbath. The synagogue was the heart of village life, the place where the community gathered, where the scriptures were read aloud, where a Galilean boy learned the law of his people by hearing it, reciting it, and learning to read it. Years later, when Jesus finally stepped into the public eye, Luke tells us that he went into the synagogue at Nazareth on the Sabbath, as was his custom. And then he stood up and read from the scroll of Isaiah, as was his custom. That small phrase is a window into 30 years we cannot otherwise see. The fluency he showed, the command of the scriptures that would later silence trained scholars, that did not appear from nowhere on the day his ministry began. It was formed here, in the unremarkable Sabbaths of a poor village, year after year after year, with no audience and no applause. Whatever the wider pattern of literacy among village craftsmen of that time and place, and historians do debate it, The Gospels are clear about one thing. This particular Tektōn knew the Scriptures intimately, and the most natural place for that to have happened is exactly the place the text points us to: the synagogue of his own small town, the slow soaking of a young mind in the Word of God across the silent years. And all the while, the village watched him grow. In a place of 50 houses, there are no strangers. The neighbors knew him as a child in the lanes, as a boy at the bench beside his father, as a young man carrying timber and dressed stone through the narrow streets. They knew his mother. They knew his brothers and his sisters by name. And they watched him become, in their eyes, exactly what they expected: a competent, ordinary craftsman, the carpenter of Nazareth. That ordinariness was so complete, so convincing, that years later, when he came back to this same village and stood up to teach with authority and power, his own neighbors were not amazed. They were offended. "Is this not the carpenter," they said, "the son of Mary? Is this not the boy we watched grow up? We know him." The very success of the hidden years, how perfectly he had vanished into the dust and labor of an unremarkable town, became the thing that blinded the people who stood closest to him. He had hidden so well that they could no longer see him. And the years did pass. That is the thing we have to let ourselves feel. Not 1 year of waiting, or 2, but year after year after year. The festivals came and went. Passover in the spring, the long hot summer of the harvest, the autumn feasts, the winter rains filling the cistern, and Passover again. Children he had known as infants grew up and married. Men he had worked beside grew old and were carried to the burial caves in the hillside. Far away in Rome, Augustus died and Tiberius took the empire. In Jerusalem, high priests rose and fell. And in Nazareth, the carpenter kept his bench, kept the Sabbath, kept the silence. For the better part of 2 decades after that one Passover in the temple, nothing the world would ever record happened to him at all. If you have ever feared that God had forgotten you in some long, uneventful stretch of your life, hold on to this. The Son himself lived through nearly 20 years of exactly that. There is only one moment the Gospels lift the curtain on those years. One. And it is worth standing still inside it, because it tells us almost everything. Jesus was 12 years old. It was Passover, and the family had gone up to Jerusalem with the crowds, as faithful families did. When the festival ended and the caravan started home toward Galilee, his parents traveled a full day before they realized he was not among the relatives and friends in the company. Imagine the fear of that. They turned back. For 3 days, Mary and Joseph searched the crowded, dangerous capital for their lost child. And when they finally found him, he was in the temple, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions, and everyone who heard him was amazed at his understanding. His mother's words are the words of every frightened parent. "Why have you done this to us? We have been searching for you in anguish." And the boy's answer is the first recorded sentence of Jesus' life. He says, in effect, "Why were you searching? Didn't you know I had to be in my Father's house?" There it is. At 12 years old, in the one window we are given, the awareness is already there. He knows whose son he is. He knows there is a Father, a house, a mission. And yet, and this is the part we rush past, Luke tells us that he went back down to Nazareth with them and was obedient to them. The boy who knew he belonged to God's house chose, for nearly 20 more years, the workshop and the obedience and the waiting. He could have begun then. He understood then. He waited anyway. Luke closes the curtain again with a single sentence about the whole of those years, that Jesus kept growing in wisdom, in stature, and in favor with God and with the people around him. That is all. 2 decades, summed up in one line about quiet growth, the most important life in history, and the inspired record of nearly 30 years of it fits in a breath. So we come back, finally, to the question in the title. And now we can answer it in full. Why 30 years? Why the wait? I told you the first key was a number. Here is how deep it goes. When Luke describes the start of the ministry, he says Jesus was about 30 years of age. The historians among us will notice that if Jesus was born around 6 to 4 BC, and the ministry began around AD 28 or 29, his real age was likely a little over 30, perhaps 31 to 34. Luke's about 30 is a deliberate, rounded figure, because in the scriptures of Israel, 30 was the recognized age of full, public authority. And once you see the pattern, you cannot unsee it. Listen to the pattern. David was 30 years old when he began to reign as king. And David's own life is a haunting preview of this whole story, because the boy was anointed by the prophet Samuel while he was still a shepherd. And then he waited, hidden and hunted, for years before he ever wore the crown. Joseph, the son of Jacob, was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh and stepped into the role that would save nations. After 13 years of slavery and prison that no one would have called preparation at the time. And in the book of Numbers, chapter 4, the Levites entered the full service of the sanctuary at 30. A man simply was not received as carrying full, mature, public responsibility before that age. A Galilean teacher who began before 30 would have been dismissed as a boy. So when Jesus waited until about 30, he was not wasting time. He was honoring the rhythm written into the story of his own people. The Apostle Paul says it in a single phrase. When the fullness of time had come, God sent forth his Son. Not a moment early, not a moment late, the fullness of time. The waiting was obedience to a clock that God himself had set. But there is a deeper answer still, and it reaches back to the prophets. 7 centuries before Nazareth, Isaiah described the coming servant of God in words that read like a prophecy of these very years. He wrote that the servant would grow up before God like a young plant, like a root out of dry ground, with no beauty or majesty that we should look at him, nothing in his appearance to make us desire him, a root out of dry ground. That is Nazareth. Poor, forgotten, unmentioned in all the Hebrew scriptures, a place from which a man could honestly ask, as one did, can anything good come out of Nazareth? The Messiah did not come crashing into the world from a palace. He came up slowly, quietly, out of dry ground, in a place no one was watching. The hidden years are not a gap in the prophecy. They are the prophecy being fulfilled. There is one more thread, and I offer it carefully, as a possibility rather than a certainty, because that is how the evidence stands. When Matthew tells of the family settling in Nazareth, he says it fulfilled what was spoken by the prophets, that he would be called a Nazarene. Yet he quotes no single verse, and scholars have debated for centuries what he meant. One of the most beautiful suggestions connects the very name of the town to a Hebrew word in Isaiah, netzer, meaning branch. The branch that would grow from the cut-down stump of Jesse, the royal line of David. It may be a play on words too deep to prove, but if it holds, then even the name of this obscure village whispered the promise. The branch, the shoot of David, was growing in secret, in a forgotten place, waiting for his time. What remains of all this today? Sepphoris is a national park now, its mosaics still glowing in the Galilean sun, its theater half restored, archaeologists still lifting fresco fragments from the soil. Nazareth has become a city of tens of thousands, and beneath one of its churches you can still see the small, poor first-century house with its chalk vessels and its rock-cut cistern, a witness in stone to a family that owned almost nothing and changed everything. The Roman crosses of Varus are gone. The empire that raised them is gone. The capital Antipas built to flatter himself is a ruin you walk through with a ticket. And the obscure carpenter from the village over the hill is known on every continent on earth. There is a sermon in that arithmetic. The things the world counted as important, the capital, the ruler, the spectacle, all of it crumbled into ruins. And the thing the world counted as nothing, 30 quiet years of hidden, faithful, ordinary work, became the foundation of the most important life ever lived. Which is the whole reason this story was never only about him. It is about you. We are taught to despise the waiting, to treat the unseen years, the small work, the faithfulness no one applauds, as the part of life that does not count, the prelude before the real thing finally begins. The waiting in Nazareth says the opposite. Those years are not the prelude to your calling. They may be the calling itself. The Son of God, who already understood at 12, chose the workshop over the throne for nearly 2 more decades, and he did not waste a day of it. He made the hidden years holy. Whatever dry ground you are standing in tonight, his life is the promise that something is being grown there that you cannot yet see. So before you go, let me ask you the question I really want you to sit with. And this is the one I would love for you to answer in the comments. Not where you have been, but what you believe is being formed in you right now, in the season where no one seems to be watching. Tell me, I read them, and I will be looking for yours. And if these 30 silent years have spoken to you tonight, if there is someone in your life who is in their own long season of waiting, who needs to hear that it is not wasted, share this video with them right now. It may be exactly what they need to keep going. If you want to keep walking with us through the real world of the scriptures, the places, the people, the years that history almost forgot, then subscribe and turn on the bell so the next journey finds you. Because the Bible is full of hidden years, and there are more roads like this one left to walk. The carpenter laid down his tools and walked out of Nazareth and into the light. He had waited his whole life for that morning. The question this story leaves with each of us is simple, and it will not let go. What is God preparing in your waiting that the world has not yet seen?